Hello everyone! In this video I do a comprehensive set of scientific tests on the Mi Smartband 6. First, I'll test the quality of the sleep tracking against a scientific EEG monitor. Second, I'll test the heart rate accuracy. Third, I'll look at the SpO2 measurements. And finally, I'll do a step counting test. As always, I do not want to waste your time, so timestamps are in the description below and also on the timeline. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Rob and I'm a scientist specializing in biological data analysis based in Vienna, Austria. Before getting to the test, I would like to provide the most important background information on the Mi Smartband 6 in under 30 seconds. The Mi Band 6 has a 1.56-inch AMOLED display and can track your sleep, heart rate, steps and oxygen saturation, the last one also being called SpO2. It does all of this using a PPG heart rate sensor, 3-axis accelerometer and 3-axis gyroscope. It has 14 days of battery life, is waterproof up to 5 atmospheres and has 30 fitness modes. However, my channel is not so much about listing the features. Instead, on my channel I try to test the accuracy of the different measurements. And in the last few weeks the Mi Band 6 has been the most requested video. In this video I will do a first set of scientific tests, testing the sleep tracking, heart rate accuracy, step counting and SpO2. Let's start off with the sleep tracking. For the sleep comparison, I wore the Mi Band 6 to bed for 4 nights, and at the same time I also wore this portable scientific EEG device. The EEG device can actually measure your brain waves and also the muscle movements in your face. I manually went through the recording of the EEG and scored each part of the night for the different sleep stages. I also had to manually copy over the data from the Xiaomi Wear app and import it into my programming language. Now, to the results I obtained. Let's first have a look at the accuracy over the 4 individual nights, after which I will do a statistical overview analysis. Here we see the first night I recorded. On top we see the sleep stages as they were recorded using the EEG device. On the horizontal axis we have the time of night, and as you can see I went to bed around midnight. On the vertical axis we have the different sleep stages, that being deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep and awake. The sleep stages are plotted in the order that they're usually displayed in research. On the bottom you can see a similar plot, but now for the sleep stages as they were recorded by the Mi Band 6. If we first look at deep sleep according to the EEG, which are marked here in purple, we see only a partial overlap between the Mi Band 6 and the EEG device. The Mi Band picked up on the first bit of deep sleep but failed to pick up on the second. Additionally, it detected some extra deep sleep near the end of the night. If we look at REM sleep, which are marked here in red, we see a partial overlap. It appears to have done well for the first part of the night where we see a decent overlap. However, the Mi Band picked up on almost no REM sleep during the second part of the night. To see the sleep cycles, I added non-REM sleep in blue and again marked REM sleep in red. Each sleep cycle starts with a combination of deep sleep and light sleep, together called non-REM, and always ends in REM. We appear to be able to see the first 2 sleep cycles based on the Mi Band data, but not really any of the sleep cycles during the second part of the night. If we look at those moments where I woke up during the night, marked here in green, we see a partial match. The Mi Band picked up on the second longer awakening, but not the first. Also, there appears to be a slight shift in time. It could be that the shift is due to a difference in the internal timekeeping of both devices. However, since both are frequently synced with internet-connected devices, this shouldn't really happen. If we look at detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up, marked here in yellow-brown, this was detected okay. There was a slight delay in both cases, though again this might be due to the internal timekeeping. This is the second night I recorded. If we first look at deep sleep, we again see a partial match, though in this case the match is slightly better than what we saw for the first night. It picked up on the first segment and partially also on the segments after that. REM sleep is also detected a lot better for this night. The Mi Band picked up on 4 out of 5 segments. This also means that we can see the majority of the sleep cycles for this night. If we look at awake time, this was again partially detected, with the second awake moment detected, though it was significantly longer and slightly delayed. Detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up was again pretty good. However, again we see a slight shift. Now let's very quickly go through the last 2 nights. For this night we see pretty poor deep sleep detection. The deep sleep that was there was not detected, and a lot of deep sleep was detected later in the night. REM sleep detection was also really bad for this night. The REM sleep, according to the Mi Band, seems almost randomly distributed throughout the night, which also means you would never be able to see any of the sleep cycles. Awake detection was okay for this night, since it detected my single awakening. Again, detecting sleep onset and sleep end were pretty good. This is the final night I want to look at. Here we actually see it detected me as being awake during deep sleep, which is not very promising. These 2 stages are in many ways polar opposites. Also, REM sleep detection was not very good for this night. And overall, awake detection was pretty poor. It detected a lot more awakenings and even detected me being awake during deep sleep, and it did not pick up on my single awakening. Again, the only thing that went well was detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up. Based on these results, I would say that the Mi Band 6 is good at detecting when you fall asleep at night and when you wake up in the morning. However, it appears to be pretty bad at detecting the different sleep stages. To get an even more objective view of the results, let's calculate some statistics regarding the consistency between the sleep stages of the Mi Band 6 and the EEG device. However, first a quick side note. If you're interested in the latest updates on the wearables I'm testing, consider subscribing to my Instagram and my weekly newsletter. Of course, you would also make me really happy if you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Enough self-promotion. Let's see what the overview statistics say. First, let's look at the total percentage of each sleep stage the EEG device and the Mi Band 6 predicted. Here I display those percentages for the EEG device on the left and the Mi Band 6 on the right. Overall, these percentages agree very well. The Mi Band 6 mostly predicts a bit too much deep sleep and not enough REM sleep, so that looks pretty good. However, of course, these percentages do not tell the full story. More important even than these total percentages is checking if the Mi Band 6 predicts the correct sleep stages at the right time. And that's what I displayed here. On top we have the sleep stages according to the EEG device, and on the left the sleep stages according to the Mi Band 5. Now each column here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the actual sleep stages was recorded as each sleep stage by the Mi Band 6. First, looking at deep sleep, we see that a little under 1/3 of what was actually deep sleep was also predicted as being deep sleep. Almost half of what was deep sleep was actually predicted as light sleep by the Mi Band 6. Light sleep, on the other hand, was mostly correctly predicted. However, significant parts were also predicted as being deep sleep and REM sleep. 25% of what was REM sleep was also predicted as being REM sleep. However, a much larger part was detected as being light sleep. Awake detection had a match of only 31%. However, almost all of the other awake time was detected as light sleep and never as deep sleep. Additionally, we saw in the individual nights a slight shift in the timekeeping, which might make these results seem a bit worse than they actually are. To conclude, the sleep stage detection of the Mi Band 6 is not great. The sleep stages are not that reliable, especially REM and deep sleep tracking is pretty bad. On the other hand, the total time spent in bed appears to be tracked well, which might still make it useful. For the next set of tests, let's take a look at the heart rate accuracy of the Mi Band 6. To test the heart rate accuracy, I will compare it to the Polar H10 ECG chest strap, which is generally considered to be one of the most accurate consumer devices available for heart rate measurements. I wore both the Mi Band 6 and the ECG chest strap for 6 spinning workouts and 3 weightlifting sessions. Unfortunately, when preparing this video, I found out it was not possible to export my data from the new Mi Band app. Therefore, I had to find a workaround. However, this solution only works for newly collected data. At the end of the day, this means I can only do a full analysis for 2 spinning workouts and 1 weightlifting session. Luckily, these were representative of the results I had before, which I will also briefly show you. Let's get to the results. Here I displayed an overview of the heart rate accuracy. Each dot here is a single heart rate measurement, with along the horizontal axis the value according to the Polar H10 chest strap, and along the vertical axis the value according to the Mi Band. The blue line indicates perfect agreement, so any measurement along this line had roughly the same value for the Polar H10 and the Mi Band 6. The red line indicates those measurements where the value according to the Mi Band 6 is half the actual value according to the Polar H10. The reason I added this line is because in the past I've seen that many devices measure half the actual heart rate when they make a mistake. The more measurements there are in a certain area, the darker black the color. As you can see, overall there's only a partial agreement between the Mi Band 6 and the Polar H10. We have a really big blob of points here where the heart rate is really high according to the Polar H10, but the Mi Band 6 detects a much lower heart rate. This doesn't look very promising, but let's have a look at the individual training sessions to see if we can find the underlying cause. Here we can see the first spinning workout. In blue-green we have the heart rate according to the Mi Band 6, and in red my heart rate according to the ECG device. As you can see, I took several breaks where my heart rate would dip. Interestingly, there isn't that good of an agreement between the two devices. For the first part of the training, the Mi Band 6 kept up with the heart rate according to the ECG device. However, after the first real break, it never caught up with my real heart rate and kept detecting a too low heart rate. Let's have a look at the other spinning session. If we look at the second session, we see something similar. For a little under half of the training, it was able to detect the correct heart rate. However, for a large part, it detected way too low of a heart rate. Next, let's take a look at a weightlifting session, which you can see here. For this session, we see mostly something that is typical for many of the optical heart rate sensors I've looked at in the past. Basically, the Mi Band 6 can track the overall patterns in my heart rate changes, but not the sudden spike in heart rate that accompanies each set I did. Because during weightlifting I flex the muscles and tendons near my wrist, this makes it difficult for the watch to accurately detect the sudden changes in my heart rate. However, furthermore, we can see that during 2 sets it detected a strong decrease in my heart rate, where it should have detected an increase. Overall, this does not bode well for the heart rate sensor. As I mentioned, I wasn't able to extract more of the data I collected. However, on the apps themselves I can see that these follow the same pattern. On top here you see my heart rate according to the Mi Band, and on the bottom is my heart rate according to the ECG device. Again, you can only really see an increase in heart rate in the Mi Band during the first part of the training, and maybe during 1 or 2 spikes near the end. However, as we saw for the other training sessions, it got too low a heart rate for most of the training. The same is true for this next spinning session right here. So this does seem to be a consistent problem for the Mi Band 6. Overall, the Mi Band 6 performs poorly when it comes to heart rate measurements. This did surprise me as it performed worse than its predecessor, the Mi Band 5. In another test, I found the Mi Band 5 on occasion had similar problems to the ones we saw here for the Mi Band 6. However, the Mi Band 6 always appears to have these problems. Next, let's take a look at SpO2 or oxygen saturation. In really simple terms, this is the percentage of red blood cells in the bloodstream that contain oxygen. This can be an important measure because it can be used as an indication for several medical conditions. For instance, it can be used to 1. Detect sleep apnea, where you basically stop breathing for 30 seconds or more during sleep. 2. Keep track of lung diseases. And 3. Potentially detect respiratory infections such as COVID-19. In all these cases, your blood oxygen saturation can drop to anywhere from the low 90% to 60%. Normal ranges, on the other hand, are between 95% and 100%. To collect SpO2 data in the morning and evening, I took 1 or more SpO2 measurements with the Mi Band 6 and 4 measurements with this dedicated SpO2 monitor. In total, I took 30 SpO2 measurements with the Mi Band 6. The Mi Band 6 uses reflectance pulse oximetry, basically shining light on your skin and measuring the reflected light. The dedicated SpO2 monitor uses the more established transmittance pulse oximetry, which shines light at one side of your finger and measures what comes through on the other side. I discussed the difference in more detail in a video on the Withings Scanwatch, but in general, transmittance pulse oximetry is considered more accurate and is used in hospitals around the world. I was still a bit hesitant to put any tests on oxygen saturation in this video. However, in a previous video on the Honor Band 6, I got a lot of positive feedback. For a really good test, I would want to artificially change the amount of oxygen in the air, thereby changing my SpO2 values to much lower levels. During this experiment, I would actually measure the blood gases in my blood by taking blood samples. Unfortunately, I cannot do either of these things. However, I can check if the measurements of the Mi Band 6 fall into a realistic range and if they agree with the finger pulse oximeter. Now, this is not a thorough test, but regardless, let's take a look at the results. Here I display an overview of the SpO2 measurements I did. On the horizontal axis are my SpO2 values, and the number of times I measured these values are on the vertical axis. As you can see, most of the time the values were in the normal, healthy, expected range. However, a few times it did detect a rather low SpO2 value still, at least compared to the values I'm used to getting. So let's compare these values to the values I got with the finger SpO2 sensor. That is what is plotted right here. with now on the right the finger SpO2 sensor plotted in red. As you can see, this only reported values between 98% and 100% during the same moments of measurements. So this does indicate that potentially sometimes the Mi Band 6 reports too low SpO2 values, though they're not drastically low. Overall, the SpO2 values according to the Mi Band 6 were sometimes a bit lower than I expected. However, I would have to say that I found no definitive reason to doubt the accuracy of the oxygen saturation measurements of the Mi Band 6. Still, I would like to test how well it detects a low oxygen saturation in a very controlled scientific setting. The Mi Band 6 also features a step counter. To see if this counts my steps accurately, I went out and took exactly 3000 steps in segments of 1000 steps. To get an accurate reference step count, I manually counted my step using this tally counter. Let's take a look at the results. As I mentioned, for the step counting test, I went out and took 3 times exactly 1000 steps. I wore the Mi Band 6 on my left arm and alternated holding the tally counter in my left and right hand for each set of 1000 steps, which is what the right and left labels refer to here. These are the actual steps counted by the Mi Band 6 when wearing it on my left arm. And as you can see, these were pretty close to the actual 1000 steps I took for each of the 3 segments. It was only 16 steps off maximum. Just to put that into perspective, here are the steps counted by the Mi Band 5 and the Honor Band 6 that I wore at the same time. As you can see, they generally performed about equally well, all being very close to the actual 1000 steps. Overall, the step counting was very accurate. In a future video, I will do an even more detailed step counting test. In that video, I also want to test if the Mi Band 6 gives any false positive steps. With that I mean, does it count any steps when it's not supposed to count steps, for instance when typing or cycling? I also want to see how it performs on other people. Overall, the Mi Band 6 did not perform great in my tests. The heart rate measurements were pretty bad, even for the cardio workouts. As we've seen for most wrist-worn wearables, it also did not perform well during weightlifting. I would say that sleep tracking was not that great on the Mi Band 6. It can detect your total time in bed rather well, however the sleep staging was not very good. I would consider the total time spent in bed to be the single most important thing to measure about your sleep. So if anything should be detected well, it should be this. Though I cannot do a conclusive oxygen saturation test, the measurements I did get were in a somewhat realistic range, so they might be legit. Finally, the step counting accuracy was also pretty good, with the Mi Band 6 counting the correct number of steps while walking. Should you buy the Mi Band 6? Well, in general, my first impression is not too positive. If they could fix the heart rate measurements with a software update, then it could be worth considering. However, as it stands, I would not recommend it. If you want something similar to the Mi Band 6, the Honor Band 6 is likely a much better option. I'd expected the two of these to perform similarly honestly, but unfortunately the Mi Band 6 performed worse. If you want a wrist-worn wearable that tracks your heart rate accurately in most circumstances, then you should get an Apple Watch. If you want the best sleep tracking from a watch, get a Fitbit device, like the Fitbit Charge 4, Fitbit Sense or Fitbit Inspire 2 I looked at a while ago. The Withings Sleep Analyzer, which you put under your mattress, also performs reasonably well. For the measurements with the dedicated SpO2 monitor, I used the middle finger of my left and right hands. The study linked below found that the middle finger is probably the best finger to use, though honestly I found the evidence not to be very convincing. I owned 3 different SpO2 monitors, and based on a previous video I made about how oxygen saturation drops when you're flying, I found the SpO2 sensor I used in this test to be the most reliable. I found that it could clearly detect changes, even in the more normal ranges of oxygen saturation. However, for proper SpO2 measurements, I would have to take blood samples. Finally, I should mention some of the limitations of the data that I showed here. First of all, I just tested the Mi Band 6 for a limited number of days and just on me, and it will be interesting to see how it performs on others. Second, the SpO2 test I did is very limited in its scope, as I mentioned in the video. Finally, to do a full sleep comparison, it would be good to also test the Mi Band 6 against the full scientific polysomnography setup. We assembled a polysomnography device using OpenBCI components, and we're now working on getting this software functional. This way, I will not have to rely on sleep labs for my testing, which is especially difficult in these times of Corona. A big shout out to my colleague Rob for the 3D printing and putting it together, and my colleague Freddy for his software and hardware expertise. In my videos, I do scientific tests on different devices like the Oura Ring, the Fitbit, and the Scanwatch. And in the end, I hope to use tracking to improve my life. So if you like that subject and like this video, consider subscribing to my channel and also consider giving it a thumbs up because it makes it easier for other people to find my videos. Thank you so much for watching and consider also watching some of my other videos, for instance the video on the Honor Band 6.